Okay. My name is Kamaya Hoskins. I'm 27 years old and I have sickle cell disease. I have sickle cell SS, which is probably one of the worst of the sickle cell. There's also the trait and different forms of it. My mom and dad both had the trait, so because they both had the trait, they end up passing it to me and I end up carrying the disease. A lot of people don't know they have the trait actually until they have a baby and their baby gets tested and they found out through their child. But now with up-to-date technology, you can actually get tested for sickle cell and kids are actually automatically tested at birth. Sickle cell is basically just a blood disease. It's a chronic blood disease. It happens when some of your red blood cells aren't as circular shaped. They're more crescent, like a banana or a moon, half moon, and they block and become sticky and they stick together and they block your other red blood cells that are circular shaped from passing through. And in this case, when that happens, you end up having pain. So when blood can't properly travel through your body into your lungs, you have pain, chronic pain, and this puts you in a crisis that can last for sometimes hours, days, sometimes weeks. What comes with this is a lot of damage to your body overall. So even though sickle cell is a blood disease and it affects your body in pain, but it also affects your organs in the long term. It affects your joints as far as your hips and your shoulders. A lot of people end up having ABN and needing like a hip replacement. So currently I'm in the hospital at Northwestern Memorial, and I'm here because I basically went into crisis a couple weeks ago actually. A sickle cell crisis is basically, as I was describing, about when the blood isn't flowing properly through your body and you start to have pain. So, and right now, because we're doing the process of the season change, this kind of happens a lot. One of the triggers for me at least is the change of weather, stress, being too cold, and some other things. But I was at home and I felt my body going into a crisis. On top of this, I had just previously gotten out the hospital and had like a shortage of meds, and so I was trying to overcompensate with not having meds, with taking like Tylenol until my prescription became ready, but the pain just became unbearable. I started to have shortness of breath, chest pain, so then I had to come in. And when I came in, I actually found out, on top of me just being in pain and thinking it's a regular crisis, that I also had acute chest syndrome and possible pneumonia. And acute chest syndrome is a lung infection, and also because I've had acute chest syndrome a couple times in the past before, I've also had pneumonia and double pneumonia. I have chronic damage to my lungs, so I have a lot of scarring on my lungs, and so my lungs are not that great and don't really help me as much as I need them to. So with all of this going on, I also began to have a lot of shortness of breath, mostly with activity. So literally walking maybe from here to the bathroom, my oxygen would drop, my heart would start beating tremendously fast. And so that's when they put me on oxygen, gave me a bunch of meds, did a bunch of testing. So recently in April, I found out during the crisis that I had COVID. And I think finding out I had COVID and being in the hospital alone probably was one of the scariest times that I've had dealing with sickle cell or being in the hospital in general. I mean, I came in for a crisis. I had a doctor who basically acted like she couldn't tell the difference between a crisis and COVID. I tested negative for COVID multiple times and was still put on the COVID floor. Eventually, a week later, I ended up testing positive for COVID. And I mean, I was actually getting ready to end my stay in the hospital, and my oxygen just started to decrease like fast. So when that happened, I started to get worried. I started to panic. I'm in my room, and during COVID, the nurses only allowed in the room and the doctor, but they were usually doing calls. So they really wanted as minimum people in the room as possible. I mean, no janitors, not even like the dietary people could come in the room. So at this point, my oxygen is dropping. My nurse has been in my room for an hour. I look up and it's like 15 other people in my room. It's a bunch of nurses, the pulmonologist, you know, just a bunch of people in there. So, you know, they end up putting, you know, leads on my chest. They had a crash cart, and, you know, so now at this point I'm panicking. A doctor was just basically telling me that my oxygen is really low. I'm not breathing at a level that they would like me to be. And the oxygen in my, I was actually on oxygen already at like 2 liters. They actually had to go up to 4 liters, and 4 liters still wasn't sufficient enough. And so at that point, I guess in the hospital, they had it where if you needed 4 liters or more, you automatically have to go to the ICU. So we're having a conversation about, you know, a ventilator and, you know, all of these things. So of course I'm getting scared because a lot of people who were getting put on ventilators weren't making it out of the hospital. So I end up going to the ICU. I end up getting put on what was called a high flow nasal cannula. And I couldn't eat or drink nothing because they were basically telling me that it was still up in the air if I would need to go on a ventilator or not. And also they were debating about giving me a blood exchange. And a blood exchange is a little bit different from a blood transfusion. So with a blood transfusion, it's usually where they give you maybe 1 or 2 units of blood, kind of through an IV, just a regular IV, maybe in your arm or anywhere else. And that's it. But a blood exchange is where they may give you anywhere between 4 to 8 units of blood through a special line, a special catheter, and they also take out those same amount of units. So you're getting blood and taking out blood at the same time. And it's a process that actually usually goes a little quicker than a blood transfusion. So, you know, I had to fight and advocate for myself because they were, you know, a little hesitant. And I was just telling them because I have sickle cell and my oxygen is already low because my blood cells are not, you know, traveling properly. So with COVID, of course, this is also taking my oxygen away, and I have another, you know, issue with my lungs. So they finally listened. I got the exchange, and, you know, I had like started turning around. I started getting better. I was walking around in the ICU. You know, I was doing everything I could to get well. You know, I have a 4-year-old, so I wanted to make sure I got home to my baby girl. I mean, I stayed in the hospital for 34 days and I went home that Saturday before Mother's Day. So I was thankful that I was one of the people who beat COVID, especially with having a chronic illness like sickle cell. So yeah, that was definitely scary. I mean, yeah, it's easy to stay in the house or, you know, or tell someone to stay in the house, but I think with COVID and already being a person that's sick, it's like now you have to reevaluate your whole life, you know, even family, you know, you have to figure out who to shut off, you know what I'm saying, during this time. And like, oh, you know, I can't really be around you, you know. Not saying they're like bad people or they're not doing what they're supposed to, but just because maybe the exposure they have as far as if they're going to work daily and they have to be in contact with other people. Or so yeah, that has been really hard. And I know it affected me tremendously. So I know it is affecting, you know, a lot of other people who have many other diseases or infections or illnesses that they're going through. The pandemic, COVID in general, first of all, I feel like has been a very hard thing to deal with having sickle cell, and like you said, I mean, and just as having some type of pre-existing condition in general. Because, I mean, unlike other people who may be totally healthy, we already have something that's counting against us. So it's easier for us because, you know, we are already, whether it's an infection or disease or, you know, something like asthma or something even less critical than that. But because we already have something that's counted against us that already affects our body in a different way, that already affects our health, you know, COVID being an infection, a virus, first of all, that was newly to the public and that was spreading so fast, it has also been hard because it's like, you literally have to stay away from people. You have to make sure not only that you're washing your hands or, you know, keeping your hands out your face and staying clean, but that others are. I mean, you just have to be aware of your surroundings and the people you're coming in contact with and who they're coming in contact with. I feel donating is a major part because sickle cell is a hidden and I feel like invisible disease that not many know about and it's not talked about a lot. So I feel like strides and awareness are very low because, I mean, you have the sickle cell community in itself, you know, talking about sickle cell and trying to open up awareness to the world, but I feel like it would go a long way if more people were able to bring about awareness, like bigger name celebrities who may have it or who have siblings or relatives that may have it. But a lot of research, funding, sending donations and funding for research advances to help with the researching of more cures, more studies, to figuring out more medicines for sickle cell. Having sickle cell as a patient and expenses that come with it. So being in the hospital, so insurance basically primarily takes care of most of the medical bills, as far as just my hospital stays, surgeries, ER visits, and things like that, and even meds sometimes. You do have occasional issues where you need a certain medication or a certain type of medication or brand of medication that you may not get because insurance won't pay for it. And when you have these issues, a lot of times you have to pay out of pocket. A lot of times, a lot of the medicines can be pricey because they're medicines, of course. And, with me having sickle cell, especially now, my sickle cell has gotten worse than it was when I was younger. So I'm not able to work. So now I'm basically, I don't have a steady income, which a lot of people with sickle cell don't have a steady income. They're basically, trying to figure out different things to do for income or little at-home jobs or things like that they can partake in that won't require too much out of them as far as endurance or activity or things like that, of course. And then not only just that, I feel like the constant clinic visits, traveling back and forth to the hospital for clinic visits to see different doctors as far as the hematologist, the cardiologist, having to get blood work done. And even when you're in the hospital, especially if you're like me, like I really don't like the food in particular. So necessarily if you want to like order different food or have food sent to you, and people when they come visit, just parking fees, whether you're on the street or the parking lot, it's just you accumulate many fees outside of just like the immediately hospital fares for when you have sickle cell. And like I said, it's not always easy to compensate for it because you're not able to work a constant job, and a lot of jobs are not understanding to the fact that you have sickle cell and that, I can't maybe, sometimes I may need to take off for a week or a week and a half, and that's not, that they're looking at that like, well, what do you want me to do with that? And, I got fired from many jobs in the past just because of having this illness, and, I'll be coming to work, I'll do everything I need to, but when it came to me getting sick and as severe as I am now, like sick where I'm in the hospital for maybe a week or two at a time, then it became an issue. And sometimes maybe they'll be okay with it one time, but then if it happens again, or if you have to stay home because you're not feeling well, or you need to take a break at work because you can't be on your feet that long, it's like it creates issues, and you get laid off, and it's sad, but it's unfortunate, but it happens. You can support by donating to the Sickle Cell Foundation. And if you want to support me as far as donating a meal or I love you, I'm thinking of you gift, I'll leave my email and contact information on the screen. I'm 27, so I've been dealing with sickle cell for a really long time. And like as I stated, when I was younger, it was a lot. It wasn't as rough as it is now. I feel like now that I'm older, I'm having more chronic hospitalizations and chronic issues that are going on as far as my heart and lungs and different things like that. I just feel like sickle cell, it's a painful disease, and it really affects you not only physically but mentally. So I feel like bringing awareness to the disease is imperative, and also I feel like those who have it and people in their circle who know they have it, I feel like being a support system to the ones that have sickle cell and being there for them during their time, whether it's a call, a text, an email, a smoke signal. Any little thing helps. I feel like even if you don't want to overcrowd a person, like I said, sending them a letter or even checking on them every now and then. I just feel like support is definitely needed for people who are going through, because we literally are in pain almost daily. We're going through chronic issues. We can't do a lot of things that a lot of other people can do, and it gets tiring and it gets weary. I'm currently in school. I feel like I've been in school forever. But, in the end, you know, I have a goal. I want to be a doctor. You know, I want to not only advance sickle cell, but I also, if not a cure is found, but, you know, find a cure. I also want to own my own practice. You know, I want to give back to the community, and, you know, I want to be what many doctors have been to me. So I think this wraps it up.